Today we're starting our new measurement topic, and the first type of measurement we're going to look at is measuring length. Now the red words are some of the words we use when we're recording length, how long something is. We've got centimetres, metres, millimetres and kilometres. Now just have a think for a moment, which do you think is the longest of those and which is the shortest? If we had to put them in order, do you think a metre's longer than a millimetre or is it shorter? Which one would go first and which one would go last? So the smallest of all of those is actually millimetres. And if you look on the ruler up there, that's those really tiny lines that you can hardly see. Now after millimetres comes centimetres, and after centimetres comes metres, and then finally kilometres. So they've all got the word metres, haven't they? They all share that. Now the little symbol, the abbreviation we use, millimetres, we write mm because it would take ages to write that whole word. Centimetres is the one you see the most of in school, and that's cm, it's a Cinderella C. Metres is just m, and a kilometre is km. Now sometimes you see some other words to do with length, and I've hidden them under here. And we've got miles, yards, inches and feet. Now we're not going to be using any of those. Those are sort of really old-fashioned words, different ways of measuring. You do hear them a lot still, but those are not the ones that we're going to be using in school. We are using millimetres, centimetres, metres and kilometres. Now you can find out how many of one measurement fits in the other. So 1 centimetre is 10 millimetres. 1 metre is 100 centimetres. And 1 kilometre, you might be able to guess this because there's sort of a pattern happening here, isn't there, is 1,000 metres. We didn't have a fact of the day today, so I want you to write those into your book, and you can write the shortened version. So the shortened version would be 1 cm equals 10 mm per millimetres, and then 1 metre equals 100 cm per centimetres, and the bottom one would be 1 kilometre equals 1,000 metres. So you can write the short version, you don't need to write the long version. These are some of the different things I found at school that we use to measure. So we've got lots of different types of rulers here, which isn't very helpful. We've even got this one here, hasn't even got any numbers on it, but it does say centimetres. And if you count the spaces, there's 20 centimetres there. So you could use that if you counted the spaces. This one, which you'll have seen before when we do English, is not that helpful. It's got so many different numbers on it. It's got FT, which means feet, and we don't do feet. It has got centimetres down the bottom. So there's 10 centimetres, 20, 30, 40. So there are centimetres on it, but it's very muddled to look at. Now this is quite old-fashioned because it's a wooden ruler, but this one's really helpful because it's only got centimetres. And it goes up to 30. Now most rulers are 30 centimetres long. It's like the standard length for a ruler. And this is the one that you were sent home with last year. It's not helpful that it's got inches, but it has got centimetres. At the start, instead of 0, it says mm and cm, but that's where the 0 would be. And it goes up to 30. And you might have seen these ones before. Clear ones are very useful because if you want to put it on top of something, you can see through it to measure, and that's also 30. And if you look just like the other one, the actual first line isn't right at the end. So you have to be really careful about where you start measuring from. I think this one down the bottom is my favourite one. This is called a metre stick. And so the centimetres are marked on there very clearly, and it also marks the tens on. So you can count them in tens, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, and then 90, and then it says 1. So why do you think it says 1? It's a bit like when we were counting in 10p's. And instead of getting up to 100, you then say £1. Well, with measuring length, you say 1 metre. So that means 1m is 1 metre, which is the same as 100 centimetres. If you look at these sentences, the unit of measurement is missing. I wonder if you can guess what it might be. So the first one said, a maths book is 30 m's long. So think about your maths books. Do you think they're 30 metres long, 30 millimetres or centimetres? Then we've got a rubber is 20 m's long. Think about the size of a rubber. The classroom is 10 m's wide. No, I'm not completely sure about that. I haven't checked. Then it says the beach is 2 m's away. So if you think about the order we put them in, that will help. Now the smallest thing in that list is the rubber. So a rubber is 20 millimetres long, which is the same as 2 centimetres. So the maths book would be the next thing. So a maths book is 30 centimetres, which you might remember is exactly the same length as a ruler. So our big maths books are 30 centimetres long. The classroom is 10. Now the next one in order would be metres. So the classroom's 10 metres wide. 10 of those big sticks would go across the classroom. And the beach is 2 kilometres away. So that helps you to think about which unit you would use for which sort of measuring. So if you're measuring something really tiny, you wouldn't measure it in metres. And if you were measuring something that was far, far away, you wouldn't measure that in centimetres, you choose kilometres. So when you're using a ruler, you need to make sure you're using the right side of the ruler because lots of them have 2 different sizes, 2 different types of measurements. So if you look for the little cm sign, this one's got cm for centimetres, it's also got mm for millimetres, but you're looking for cm. And on this ruler, you'll notice that where the 0 would be isn't at the end of the ruler. So there's a line there, and that's the line you have to start measuring from. Don't use the other side. This one's in inches, which is a different sort of measurement. So you are looking for the cm. So if I wanted to measure this book, I wouldn't put the ruler there. I'd need to line up the end of the book exactly with where that line is. And remember, it's not, on this one, it's not the end of the ruler. It's there, it's a bit further in. So if you look carefully, you can see this book is 19 centimetres long. So if I'm measuring this glue stick, let's line it up right on the end. And it's just about there. So that would make it 11 centimetres. Now, because it's a bit over the 11, if you're really clever, you can see it's like 1 bit over. You could write 11.1 centimetres because it means there's an extra little millimetre on the end. In your pack, we gave you a long IKEA tape measure, and you also should still have your ruler, hopefully from last time. Now you're going to use those to do some measuring. And there's 2 things I want you to measure. Don't do it yet because we're going to talk about estimating first, but we're going to be measuring hand spans, and that's the distance from your little finger to the end of your thumb when your hand is fully stretched. And the other thing we're going to be thinking about measuring is your foot. So you will have to take your shoe and your sock off to do that one. So it doesn't matter whether you use a ruler or whether you use the IKEA tape measure to do your measuring. Now there isn't a sheet for this, but I want you to record it in your book. And what makes it quite fun is if you do different people in your family, so not just you. But the really important thing is I want you to estimate first. Now, estimate is a sensible or a thoughtful guess. So it's a guess you make before you actually measure, and it's very important that you do it before, because if you just measured it first and found, oh, that's 15 centimetres, so that's 15 centimetres, we know you cheated. Sometimes estimates are so good that they're correct, but normally they're a bit wrong. So if all of your estimates are the same as your measuring, we know that you didn't really estimate at all. And that happens a lot when we do this activity in class. Lots of people measure first and then try and sneak back and write the estimate. So first of all, you're going to have a guess, a sensible guess about how far you think you can stretch your hand. Stretch your hand out in front of you, look at the ruler and think, I think I could get to that number. So my guess for mine is, let's put down 17 centimetres. And then have a look at your foot, maybe while it's still in the shoe, and look at the ruler. Don't put them next to each other yet, just have a guess. Think, well, I don't think it's as long as that ruler. My foot's quite small, so I'm going to say 24 centimetres. And then you're going to get the ruler and actually measure it. So you can measure your hand span, your foot length, then you could do your brother or sister, you could do your mum or your dad. So anyone else in the family. But remember, try and estimate first. Have a look and think, wow, do you think their hand is going to be smaller than mine, or is it going to be bigger than mine? And I've got a little video showing you the teachers having a go at that. So now I'm going to measure my hand span, which is how far you can stretch your hand across the ruler. So you need to put your thumb right on the beginning and then stretch as far as your little finger will go. And mine just about goes to 19 centimetres. So now we're going to measure Mrs. Lewis's hand. Now, do we think that hand span's going to be bigger or smaller? Let's see. Off we go. So hand right down near the end. You've got to stretch as far as you can stretch. 18 and a half. Oh, I don't think it's quite on 19. I think we'll say that's 18 and a half. So I'm going to write 18, and instead of half, I'm going to put 0.5. And then we might find someone else to do as well, another victim.
This side?
Mm-hmm. Right, so now we've got Mr. Stillwell. We're just going to stretch. You've got to stretch as far as you can. Oh. Well, see, not much different, is it? No. I think that's 20.
Hang on a minute, it's gone off the end of the ruler, look. It's not
come on. I'll hold the ruler, there we go. Oh, you got a 21. You wanted a 21.
21.
There you go.
As you could tell, the teachers all got a bit silly measuring their hands. We did measure Mrs. Flanagan's, but it was exactly the same as mine, so we didn't put hers on the list. So mine was 19 centimetres, Mrs. Lewis's was 18.5 centimetres, and Mr. Stillwell is 21 centimetres. So that is the hand span, how far they could stretch their hands across. So there's a difference between mine and Mr. Stillwell of 2 centimetres. His was 2 centimetres wider and 2.5 centimetres wider than Mrs. Lewis's. So what I want you to do now is to measure your own hand span, and it doesn't have to just be yours. You could measure anyone else in your family. It could be brothers or sisters, mums, dads, and make sure you write them down, and then maybe we could find out who has the widest hand span in the class and who has the narrowest hand span. And it's not always to do with height. It sort of was with the teachers, but it doesn't always work out that way. The TLP is, can I estimate a measure in centimetres? So I can fill my chart in. Now I've actually measured it. So my hand span was 19 centimetres, and I also did my foot. My foot was only 22 centimetres and on a size 3. So my foot might actually be the same size as some of your feet. So if you look, you can then see how close, how good your estimates were. So I was only 2 away, because 17 add 2 makes 19. And I was only 2 away this time, because 24 take away 2 is 22. So that means my estimates were quite sensible. So I now want you to fill that in, and we could find out in the Zoom how far you can stretch your hand spans, and we can compare them.